We are in the middle of a conversation here. Yani, we're already in the middle of a conversation. We're in the middle of a particular point throughout this conversation. This conversation spans over 70 comments. As you can see, we're more than halfway through because we're on 50 something. And we were talking about the attribute of yad because the Wahhabi asked about it. Not because we brought it up, because we're not going to bring up the issues. If we're dealing with a deviant person, if we're like directly talking to the deviant person, we're not going to just open up the issues. He's the one who asked, so we got into this part of the conversation. And now this is what he asks. So how do you explain the ayah about the creation of Adam? He's saying, if it doesn't mean that God created Adam with his two hands, then how do you explain this ayah about the creation of Adam? So the Sunni says, Ibn Hajar said in Fathul Bari that some scholars said that this ayah makes us understand the merit of Adam and that his creation had special honor. Yani, his creation was special. Even if we just put it that way. I like that. And that his creation was special. When the creations give something special heed, they handle it with two hands. So, when Allah revealed the word yad in the dual form about his creation of Adam, but it is known that he does not have limbs. So you put those two facts together. He revealed the dual form for yad, that's a fact. And he doesn't have a body, that's another fact. So when we put those two facts together, it was understood by a figurative expression, a figure of speech, that Allah gave Adam's creation special significance. Allah made the creation of Adam special. Add to that this expression was not used for other than the creation of Adam, although Allah created everything. Thus, we know that the ayah refers to Adam's special status with Allah, not to two body parts. So the Wahhabi says, but doesn't Allah also say that his two hands are spread wide? So the Sunni says, the ayah you referred to in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah 64, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ, it means that Allah is generous, not that he has two outstretched hands. The meaning is that he is generous. Like we said before, you don't have to, because the word yad is present, squeeze the word hand into the translation necessarily. What's most important is to give the proper meaning. Yani, the context shows that. The context shows that the meaning is that Allah is generous. If one saw the entire verse, he would see that with a figurative expression, Allah's hand is tied. That's the figurative expression. The Jews were saying that Allah is stingy or miserly. They didn't mean it literally themselves. When they said God's hand is shackled, they meant God is stingy. He's a miser. So with the figurative expression, Allah contradicted their statement and confirmed that he is most generous. Yani, with another figurative expression, one that's even more hyperbolic than theirs because it's in the dual form. Allah contradicted their statement and confirmed that he is most generous. Not that he literally has two outstretched hands. That's not the meaning. Because if he has two outstretched hands, means then what? He has arms, has hands, then he has arms, so he has shoulders that swivel so that he can stretch his hands out, so he has a torso. Wal-'iyadhu billahi ta'ala, that's Wahhabi creed, that God has a torso, even if he doesn't say so. Again, it is not a condition to find a way to fit the word hands in the translation. Explain the proper meaning. And what further proves that? And what further proves that this is the meaning is that he said in the same verse, يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ, he gives as he wills. So it's about generosity. It's about giving. It's not about having hands. It's not about having limbs. They are using this ayah completely out of its context. They are ignoring the context of the ayah altogether just so that they can confirm that Allah has body parts. This proves that it means that Allah is generous and not that he literally has two outstretched hands. So the Wahhabi says, but there is also a hadith that Allah has two hands. He says, but there's also a hadith that Allah has two hands. So the Sunni responds. The Prophet saying, Kilta yadayhi yamin, literally says, yani, it would, in a literal sense, mean that both of his hands are right hands. This in itself proves our point, that it should not be taken literally. Because two right hands is a deformity. Two right hands is a deformity. And some Christians left comments on they left me comments saying, yani, talking about the ridiculousness of this. Though they can't speak, the people who believe that God is his own son and his own father, they would dare to claim that something is ridiculous. But they did, more than one. There was a video I put out about Christians not too long ago. Actually, it's like the fastest growing video I ever had on my YouTube. They were so mad. They wouldn't stop leaving comments. And then all of a sudden, it stopped. All stopped. YouTube turned my video off, basically. You can still access it, but it's like they shut it down. They stopped it. They, as if they were afraid it would go viral or something. So they just shut it. When I look at my, what do they call it, the analytics in the YouTube, I can see like how it's going up, because it's got so many views, and then just flatline. No more views, no more comments, nothing. Just stopped altogether. Anyway, that's out of our point here. So, but my point in mentioning the Christians is that they said you and your God who has two right hands, or something to that effect, because of their contact with Wahhabis. Had it not been for Wahhabis, they wouldn't have been able to make this insult. So the Wahhabi says, you are rationalizing what cannot be rationalized. We must just accept it as it is. Don't forget, as it is, that's Wahhabi code for literally. Because often the Wahhabis use words that can go both ways. They'll say something that could mean, we accept it as per its wording. We accept its wording, because that's what we do, accept its wording. That doesn't mean we take it literally. But they don't mean it just there. They mean, we take it by its literal meaning. We take the wording by its literal meaning. That's what they mean. So the Sunni responds, again, there is no evidence from the book or the Sunnah that discourages rational thinking. So this comment here means that he definitely ignored the points that were made to him previously. What did we cite previously about using the mind? Just a few ayat out of many. When Allah says, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, think, oh, those who have vision, insight, that is, which is the intelligence or the intellect. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do you not use your minds? Do you not think? وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. And they will say, had only we listened or used our minds, we would not be inmates of the inferno. And there are many other ayat besides these that prove that we must use our minds. So for that Wahhabi, after that, to come and say, you are rationalizing what cannot be rationalized. And what number was that, by the way? Under 46. 10 statements later, he comes back, ignoring what was already said to him. 11 statements later. So the Sunni says to him, if you have something, please produce it. Why he's given this challenge? So that he would say a kufr? No. He's given this challenge believing that he has nothing to offer. One of the things that's going to make your debating with a person, or yani just trying to convince a person, weak is your reluctance to challenge him because you don't want him to say an answer. Sometimes you don't want to ask him because you don't even want him to answer you. Okay, that's a choice, but yani might not be the most effective approach. And sometimes you don't want to ask him because you're afraid he's going to say kufr. Now, if you're a person who has waswas, you're not built for this. All this discussion, you can listen to what we're saying. You can enjoy the lesson. But if you're a person who has waswas, you need to say the shahada every day, even sometimes more than once a day, because you can't get a grip on yourself. Then engaging in these types of discussions, you're not built for that. So if you don't suffer from such hauntings from the devil, then you can, in the right spots, challenge that Wahhabi when you believe he doesn't have an answer. So that's what happened here. There is no evidence from the book or the sunnah that discourages rational thinking. If you have something, please produce it. That means you don't have anything. That's what it really means. Yeah, and he could have said, you don't have anything, but he wanted to challenge him. If you have something, please produce it. That's to really expose his weakness. Of course, he doesn't have anything he can produce. All he has is what we're going to cut him off with here. As for Imam Ali saying, had the religion been by opinion, then wiping the khuf would be from the bottom instead of the top. He said opinion, ra'i, not rational thinking. He didn't say had the religion been by rational thinking. Not to mention that this is not an ayah or a hadith of the Prophet. This statement of Ali is not an ayah from the Quran and it's not a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So this is the second time here that this Sunni attempted to cut off the Wahhabi before he says something. Last time it didn't work. He tried to cut him off, but the Wahhabi said what he tried to stop him from saying anyway. Now he told him, if you have something, please produce it. And he anticipated that the only thing he probably has, if he has anything, is going to be the statement of Ali that they misinterpret. So he's going to just produce it for him before he gets a chance to produce it and debunk his misunderstanding of it ahead of time. So that's what he did. And I don't see how the Wahhabi after that can produce this saying of Ali. So if he has something else, we'll see what he would claim to have. The Wahhabi says, okay, but I just feel like you're going through too much trouble to explain the meanings away. This means he's not listening. It's like we're not getting through to him. Because he said that already and we explained it. We addressed it already. Why use the dual form if two hands is not intended? So he's repeating himself. He's going in circles. No. Now, are you going to go in circles with him? Maybe you will. If you're very patient, you'll stick with him because you hope, Yani, not just patient. If you're patient and you are optimistic, you hope, you think maybe you can get through to this guy and you're patient enough to go in circles with him to try to get him out of his loop. Or are you going to keep talking to him because you yourself, you lack self-control and you can't stop talking to him? You don't want to stop talking to him without him telling you you're right. You don't want to stop talking to him without silencing him first. If you stop talking to him now, after you couldn't silence him, you didn't make him stop talking, and you didn't convince him, maybe he's going to feel like you're weak and you didn't have any proof and you don't want him to think that. So you're going to keep talking. Is that your case? That might be someone's case. So the Sunni responds to him, firstly, I already told you that we are not emptying out the meanings. We are explaining these texts properly. And we even gave him texts that he would explain by alternative interpretations. And this is necessary so that there would not be any contradiction in the texts. Don't you know that Allah said in Surah Ash-Shura, ayah 11, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, nothing is whatsoever like him? This means absolutely he has no similar in any way whatsoever. So if you accept to explain the Quran and the Sunnah such that they are loaded with contradictions, then you will have to deal with that on Judgment Day. If anyone is emptying meanings, it's the literalists who swept the other meanings under the carpet. Yani, you accuse us of being meaning emptiers. You are meaning sweepers under the carpet. Yani, you are entire text sweepers under the carpet. That means hiding them. Some people also stuck from some people are also stuck when it comes to figures of speech. They say, don't say you swept the ayah under the carpet. You can't sweep an ayah under the carpet anyway. It's not, yani, it's not something that can be swept under a carpet in a real literal sense. Those people, yani, I will give them a hard time. Those people who fight you about figures of speech, I give them a hard time. So if you're one of them, I'm going to give you a hard time. Secondly, I told you repeatedly that you do not have to specify any meaning for these texts, as long as you confirm yad as an attribute. That's enough. You did your obligation. Say yad is an attribute of Allah. I believe in it, whatever it means. You fulfilled your obligation. You don't have to go further. And that's like other things in the religion. How are the deeds weighed in the scale? You don't know? Okay. Do you believe that the deeds will be weighed in the scale? Yeah. Okay, that's good enough. You fulfilled your obligation. How's the Kursi? You don't know? Okay. Do you believe that there's some huge object in the upper world called Kursi? Yeah. You don't know how it is? No. Okay. Do you believe in it? Yes. Okay, that's enough. You fulfilled your obligation. It's like that. What you cannot do is take it literally. So if you think that specifying meanings for these texts is too scary for you, just don't delve into their meanings. Yani, you can just say, yeah, don't translate it. Don't look for any meaning. Ayn, wajh, istiwa. If specifying meanings for these texts is too scary for you, just don't delve into their meanings. You don't have to. It's not obligatory. But if you choose to take it literally, you are doing what is worse, delving into the forbidden and destroying yourself. Did I say this part? Secondly, I told you repeatedly that you do not have to specify any meanings for these texts. Thirdly, Allah inflicts his creations with whatever he willed. Now here says secondly, then says thirdly, then we're going to read on. Fourthly, does it have fifthly? No. All right. Now, so this Sunni here, he has a lot of things to say. He has a lot to say. But what I want to point out to you here is, if this is how he's talking to this person, yeah, and he's not reading from a script. Right now, we're reading from a script. He's talking to this person. It looks like he can organize his thoughts. So practice that, organizing your thoughts. First of all, such and such and such and such. Secondly, this, and this. Now, thirdly, like that means you're organizing your thoughts and then you're saying them. And you don't have to talk fast. It's okay if you talk slow, because that sometimes is just going to help you be able to organize your thoughts. It's going to help you to get your thoughts together and speak without stumbling, without backtracking. Even if he asks you a question, you don't have to rush and give him an answer immediately as soon as he asks you. Even if you pause to think for a moment and then give an answer, that's okay. Once I did that, some lady, she asked me a question. She was opposing me. And so I just paused for a second. And then I answered her. She said, "What was that?" I told her I thought about the answer. She said, "You thought about the answer? It looks like you just," something she said, "made it up," or something like that. She didn't like the fact that I stopped to think about my answer before I answered her. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay if they think you're speechless. Don't ever worry about some things like that. If he thinks you're a moron or anything, don't even worry about that, because you just keep going forward. Because what's going to happen if you do it right is you're going to flip everything on him, and you're going to flip him on his head upside down. You just need to just keep going forward. That's all. If you choose not to answer, you said, what if I choose not to answer to protect myself? Do you know the answer, though? When you choose not to answer, are you choosing not to answer though you know the answer? So if you want, you'll answer me there and I'll go forward with you. So he says, secondly, I told you repeatedly. We read that. Thirdly, Allah inflicts his creations with whatever he willed. What he's saying is, Allah will reveal in his Quran whatever he willed, whether you can comprehend it or you can't comprehend it. If he reveals something in the Quran that you can't comprehend and it shatters your mind, then that's what he willed to do. Isn't Allah the one who commanded us not to worship anyone besides him? Yet he will send the Dajjal who claims to be God, that impostor who will do supernatural things like revive the dead and make the sky rain at his command? Looks like this Sunni took from Sheikh Abdullah. You said, yes, I know the answer, but because I haven't thought about all possibilities, I choose not to answer. So then what you're going to do, you're going to say, well, I'm not going to talk anymore. Then that means you're going to stop the conversation here. So you can stop the conversation if you want. Well, you don't have to say all these things. You can just tell him what's right and leave him. You can say what's correct is Allah doesn't resemble the creations. Allah does not have organs or body parts. And I'm going to stop this conversation. That's a choice. Or let's say you didn't know the answer. If you didn't know the answer, you can just say, I don't know. A lot of times it's going to shock a person because they don't want to say, I don't know. They themselves don't want to say, I don't know. If you say, I don't know to an answer, they might belittle you. You said, is it even obligated to tell him what's right if you don't know if he will listen or not? Allah says, فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Remind if the reminder benefits. That's one of the things I've been mentioning for you. Like, just the fact he's going in circles here. He's asking questions he already asked before. We're repeating our answers to him. So when you find you're doing that with someone, what you going to do? You're going to keep talking to him? Maybe you will. It's a choice you're going to make. Or maybe you're going to say, listen, you're taking me in circles here. I answered you already. Depends on what you think. Because maybe you think you can help the person. Now, why I keep telling you, maybe you think you can help them, because we have seen people who really were patient with people and they got somewhere. People, they were way more patient than I would ever be. I would have been done with the person. personally, but they kept trying and they got through. I'm not talking just about debating, I'm talking about a lot of things. Somebody keeps doing something over and over, keeps showing you some behavior or some attitude or the likes. One type of person will say, Khalas, you showed me enough. I'm done with you. Another person will say, I'm not done with you yet. I'll keep trying. You said, what tone is better to approach them in? Generally speaking, a jovial one. Yani, one that's not offensive. One that's not offensive. But if you have some wisdom, you can switch it. That's what I do. Yani, I'm not saying I have, maybe you have some wisdom. But like, that's what I do with even the students. Like, maybe even yourself one day, I might have given you hard tone. Why I did that? Because I believed that it's going to benefit you. I didn't do it really for a personal reason. Yeah, it maybe made my blood boil, but it's not. I'm not out of control. I can still be friendly, but I think that if I change my tone here, it's going to make you think. There was one person I talked to. He told me something that was very bad. I said to him, "You have a low status." Those are my words to him. That's offensive. This guy told me later. I don't know how much later. He said, do you remember that time you told me I have a low status? That made me think. But some of those things sometimes is a gamble. Might work, might not work. You might think it's going to work. That guy's going to say, what? Who you think you're talking to? So generally, you want to be not offensive. So this one, he says, thirdly, Allah inflicts his creations with whatever he will. Isn't Allah the one who commanded us not to worship anyone besides him? Yet, he will send the Dajjal, who claims to be God, that impostor who will do supernatural things like revive the dead and make the sky rain at his command. Similarly, Allah told us that nothing is like him, yet he revealed ambiguous verses that, if misunderstood, one will liken him to the creations. He tests his slaves as he wills and exposes who has a tendency to obey and who has a tendency to disobey. I wouldn't call him Antichrist. Fourthly, it depends on the goal of the statement. Yeah, what's the question? What is he responding to? Now, I don't even remember what's the statement. Why use the dual form if two is not intended? So the Sunni said all of this. He broke down his thought process. Second, third, fourth, he's still following the answer, the question of the Wahhabi. He didn't lose track. Sometimes if you go off on a tangent, you're going to lose track. Don't go off on a tangent. You said some Wahhabis, when you discuss with them, they believe they are correct. When you stop responding to them, subhanAllah, even though it's far from it, so it's frustrating. What should I do? Just keep quoting references from scholars who I don't accept anyway? Why would you quote the references from the scholars you don't accept? To show them? And when you discuss with logic, they say don't use logic. So just never ending hopes. Okay. Yeah, you know what you're doing here. What you're describing to me is a person who, wants to give the Wahhabi an answer that the Wahhabi wants to accept. It's like this is the type of person who wants to produce an answer that the Wahhabi wants. Let me give you an answer that you'd like. I don't advise that you give him an answer that he likes. I advise you just tell him the truth. If he accepts, then he accepts. If he doesn't accept, he doesn't accept. That's on him. You already got your guidance. Alhamdulillah. And you pray. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us on the straight path means, oh Allah, keep us guided. You have guided us. Now keep us guided. We ask you, we beg of you. You have your guidance. Alhamdulillah. He accepts. If he accepts, then he accepts. If he doesn't accept, he doesn't accept. Meaning, it's his problem. So you give him correct answers. Give him correct answers. Don't just look for answers that he wants. And also, If you're at this point with this person and you don't like to stop in a way that gives the impression that you lost, then you need to give him an answer that shuts him up. If you can find a statement, a question, or something that he has no answer for, and it will completely shut him up. Then, when you shut him up, then you say, "Okay, I'm done now." And also, I could assume from this statement here that you're not repeating yourself when you need to. Meaning, you give him an answer, and then he says something. So you give him a new answer, then he says something else, and you give him a new answer, and he says something else, and you're gonna never get anywhere with this guy because you're allowing him to not respond to what you said. Don't allow him to not respond to what you said. When you ask him a question, make him answer your question, not answer a different answer, not give an answer to a different question. Like you say to him, is the case like this or like that? And then he says, that's not what the scholar said. So I didn't ask you if that's what the scholar said. Is the case like this or like that? So it means he doesn't want to answer you. So when he says, Yani, if you said, is the case like this or like that? So the answer is like this, or the answer is like that. That's the answer to your question. You need to know the answer to your own question. If you don't know what's the answer to your question, then you don't know what he should be saying to you. If you're going to ask him a question, you need to know what the answer should be so that when he doesn't answer you, then you can bring him back. So if the answer is yes or no, then he says, that's not what the scholar said. I'd say, for example, is yes or no, though. I'm not asking you what the scholar said. I'm asking you yes or no. That's just an example I'm giving you without any particular scenario. The point I'm making is don't let him get away with not answering you. Don't let him get away with not responding to you. You're going to just keep going on and on and on and on. You'll never get anywhere. He says, so should I worry about just producing the truth as it is without just trying to refute his answer each time? Those are the same thing. But you need to know how also to take control of the conversation. Usually who's asking the question is the one who's in charge of the conversation. And one thing I would do, if I want to get the conversation out of his control, if he has control of the conversation, he's asking me questions. Then when he asks me a question, I'll answer his question. Now, he has two choices here. One choice is to ask me a new question, and the other choice is to respond to my answer. So he asks me a question, I give him an answer. So either he's going to respond to the answer I just gave him, or he's going to ask me a new question. If he responds to my answer, then I'm going to follow him here. If he asks me a new question, then I'm going to tell him no. Now you don't get to ask me a new question. You asked me a question. I gave you an answer. Do you want to answer my answer? If you don't have a response for my answer, then we can stop talking here. Or you don't want to respond to my answer, then now it's time for me to ask you a question. I asked you a question. You got the question. I gave you an answer. Now, you want to ask me a new question? You can't get a new question. Rather, now I'm going to ask you a question, and you can answer my question. Now I'm going to take control of the conversation. So when you say, without trying to refute his answer each time, wait, let me read your question again. So should I worry about just producing the truth as it is? So that's for sure. You're going to produce the truth as it is. That's for sure. Without just trying to refute his answer each time. But how many answers does he have in a row? Did you keep refuting all his answers, all his answers, all his answers? You say to him something, then he answers you. So then you respond to his answer. So if he answers you, then you respond to his answer either by repeating yourself because actually he ignored you, or what you're going to do is, if you're responding to his answer each time, if you're on the truth, then what you should be doing then is closing him in little by little, little by little, little by little. Answering his question each time really means you're closing him in. You're backing him into a corner little by little. He doesn't even know it because you're on the truth. You're saying the truth. He can't get around the truth. Yani, assuming you have enough proofs, assuming you know how to answer his issues, but he's a tricky one. So when you say something to him, you say something that still doesn't get him in the corner exactly. But every time you say something, he is really getting backed into the corner if you know how to answer him, if you answer him right. Until you finally get him exactly in the corner. Now he's not going to be able to get anywhere. He says, so just keep quoting their Wahhabi scholars. Oh, why are you going to quote their Wahhabi? What? When you say keep, no, tell him the truth. Tell him what's right. You don't have to quote his Wahhabi so-called scholars to each statement. I wouldn't do it. I will tell him what's right, and I will give him good sources. Yani, we have, as Sunni Muslims, we have our own principles, and amongst our own principles is what? Strong sources. You want to give them strong sources. You don't want to give them weak sources. I want to prove you wrong, so I'm going to tell you what your own scholar said. Don't tell him what his own scholar said. Sometimes you can, but not like the way you're asking me, because the way you're asking me is like that's the only thing you're going to do. Give him what the scholar said. Tell him what Abu Hanifa said. Tell him what Shafi'i said. And really, really, really tell him what the Quran says and tell him what the Prophet said. The hadith, Kan Allahu wa lam yakun shay'un ghayruhu. This hadith, a Wahhabi cannot get around it. Just that one. Allah existed and there was nothing other than Him. This one hadith, a Wahhabi cannot get around this hadith. So you don't need to tell him what his Wahhabi scholar said. So when I'm discussing the matter in terms of the actual point, they are more worried about producing a reference each time. So this is what making them appear correct, because I'm not producing references each statement. Doesn't matter. Make him answer your question. Tell him you don't want to answer my questions, then I'm not going to talk to you. Don't talk in according to his standard. You don't have to talk. Yeah, this is exactly what I was saying. This makes me more confident that I'm right here. You want to give him an answer that he wants. Don't give him an answer that he wants. Tell him the truth. You want to find an answer that he will accept, that he's willing to accept. You want to give him something that he's willing to accept. I'm not going to tell him something he's willing to accept. I'm going to tell him the truth. If he accepts, then he accepts. If he doesn't accept, it's his problem. That's me. Somebody else might have a different approach, and he might make a good case for it. So what if they say he changed and are not convinced that this is tashbih? Then you have to explain to him what change means. And then you have to ask him a question that he doesn't want to answer. And you say, so if he changed, doesn't that mean there's time? For example, something. And then when he refused to answer, you say, so here, right here, you refuse to answer the question. That's because you're wrong and my time is valuable. So I'm going to go now. So they might say something tashbih and just hiding behind in a way that befits him without resembling to the creations. Then you need to bring it out. You're going to bring the tashbih out. That's what we're doing. That's all this is showing, how to bring out what he's trying to hide. Talk about the hadith, Kan Allahu wa lam yakun shay'un ghayruhu. Listen, I'm telling you, if a Wahhabi, if you can give this hadith to a Wahhabi and he can get you off this hadith, then you need some practice or something. You say, how do I get out a reference war and actually get this person to use their brain? Depends on how the conversation started. Or you say to him, what's a reference you want? Who you accept from? Yani, or I'll tell you what you do. You just give him an ayah from the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet. That's what I'm saying to you right now. Listen, let's say, for example, you went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Say, listen, this is what the Prophet said. Kan Allahu wa lam yakun shay'un ghayruhu. Forget about all those other people. I don't want to talk to you about anyone. You keep Uthaymeen, you keep all those guys. I'm going to keep whoever I'm keeping. And here's the messenger of Allah. Kan Allahu wa lam yakun shay'un ghayruhu. Allah existed and there wasn't anything other than Him. That means He exists without a place. And that means He exists without time. So then the Sunni, he says, fourthly, it depends on the goal of the statement. He's asking why The Wahhabis asking, why isn't dual form if two is not meant? So the Sunni tells him, it depends on the goal of the statement. We see in Surah Yasin, ayah 71, that Allah uses the plural form, AD, and not the singular form, yad, nor the dual form, yadan or yadain. When Allah says, mimma amilat aydina, and plural form is how many? Three or more, if you want to be literal. So what's Wahhabi's going to do? He's going to say, oh yeah, this means two hands too. Because he said yadani, so AD means two hands too. Which is a big lie. So no, it doesn't mean that. So you can't let him get away with that. You say, yeah, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. That's what I would do. AD, if you said, yeah, he said AD, but it means two hands here. Because in the other ayah it said yadan. I'll tell him, no, it doesn't. So we say, yeah, it does. We'll say, no, it doesn't. Even I might not say who told him. Who said so? I'll say, no, it doesn't. If he said, well, what's your proof? I'll say, because it's plural form. If taken verbatim, it would say, from what Allah has more than two, but not more than 10 hands have done. From what Allah has more than two, but not more than 10 hands have done. That's what that's what this plural promotes. So do you say that he has three or more hands? If so, then why you previously said two? And if not, then how do you explain this ayah? If you explain it as power or anything else other than three or more hands, then you have done what you are telling me cannot be done. What you are calling emptying out the meaning. Please note that the intent is not to be offensive. Here, please note that the intent is not to be offensive, but to share knowledge and understanding. Now, if it's me, I really don't care if he's offended. But if I said something like that to him, it's because I'm trying to keep him calm and I want to help him because he might be getting frustrated. And maybe he's a violent person. Maybe. Wahhabis, sometimes they are. These people are extremists. So he could be someone that you don't want to get into a fight with, not because you're afraid, but who wants to get in a fight unless you're a fighter and you like fighting? Hey, you want to go home, right? So you don't want to be scrapping on the cement unless you like that type of stuff. Some people don't mind. So please note, so here it's just to keep him engaged here. Please note that the intent is not to be offensive, but to share knowledge and understanding. If it's me, if I told him that, I really don't care. What is correct is that Allah is attributed with yad, wajh, and ayn, not hand, face, and eye. And we'll stop there. But some of them are cowards, though. They're not all tough guys. Some of them are cowards, but a lot of them are thugs. And they don't fear Allah. They don't fear Allah. So, yeah, if you told them fear Allah, that's not going to work. Go ahead, we'll stop there. Do you have any other question? Okay, you said here. Yes, if I use a verse of the Quran or that hadith, they don't explain it in terms of what it actually says. They bring a reference from their Wahhabi scholars to explain it instead. Okay, so what you do is say, but that's not what the hadith means. You stick to the actual words of the hadith. That's what your Wahhabi sheikh said, but the Prophet actually said, Kan Allahu, that means Allah existed, walam yakun shay'un ghayruhu, and there wasn't anything other than him. So is a place Allah or other than him? That's when he's not going to want to answer the question. This means what you're saying to me is you're letting them get you off of your proofs. You got to stick to your proofs, which requires that you need to know your own proofs. You need to understand your own proofs. If you give him the ayah from the Quran, you need to understand how the ayah works. How does the hadith actually work? Like, for example, Uthman, all of us, mashallah, we're all good at something, right? You're good at one thing or another thing. So the thing that you're good at, you can explain it to a person. Let's say you're good at math and you're a tutor. So when you're a tutor, you're a math tutor, then what you're going to do, this guy who doesn't understand, then because you know how the math works, then you're going to say like this way or like that way. If he try to take you off, you're going to bring him back, say, no, it's not like that. It doesn't go like that. It goes like this or anything else. If you're good at it, then you know how it works. So when you try to explain it to a person, you're going to explain to them how it works actually. But if you're a math tutor, you don't know how the math works, and you're just going to tell them, listen, I told you 3 times 3 is 9. And he says, why? It's just, that's what it is. Then you're not going to be able to help him. Or if you're an electrician, or if you're a carpenter, or you know something, then when you explain it to a person, you say, this is how it works. It goes like this. No, like this. No, not like that, like this. Yes, like that. That's right. This way. Hakatha. So that's how you're not going to let them take you off of your proofs. Because whatever that Wahhabi said, whatever his so-called Wahhabi scholar is saying to explain is actually against the hadith. So you're not going to let them get you off the hadith. He said, how can they claim that it befits him without resemblance, knowing that their claim implies explicitly that Allah has earned a new attribute, which signifies need, and that, according to him, that his perfection is elevating, which means that he was, in a way or another, imperfect. Exactly. He said, because they believe highly of that scholar. They think yeah, but who cares? Because he's not going to let you do the same thing, right? If you tell him, Al-Kawthari said, he's going to throw Kawthari right back in your face. But when he tells you what Uthaymeen said, you want to try to pacify him? If he tells me Uthaymeen said, I'm going to throw Uthaymeen right back in his face. Don't tell me Uthaymeen. Uthaymeen is unreliable. That's what I'm going to tell him. As soon as he says Uthaymeen, I'm going to tell him Uthaymeen is unreliable. And he says, Ibn Taymiyyah is unreliable. I'm not going to say, but Ibn Taymiyyah also said, I'm going to tell him Ibn Taymiyyah is unreliable. It's going to force him to get somewhere else. Yeah, Al-Albani didn't have any teachers. That's right. I don't know if he had some teacher sometime in his life, but general statement. He's not a qualified scholar who would have had enough teachers to make him even reach the level of being a scholar. He didn't read the hadith books. He didn't take the hadith books by talaqqi, I mean. He read them, but he didn't take them by talaqqi. He didn't sit under a sheikh and learn them. Tayyib. Any other question?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is Qiyas, okay. Which one is the proofs of intellectual proofs? Which one is that? Is that Qiyas?
Intellectual proof come from the Quran and
Intellectual proof come from the Quran and the Sunnah. And the Sunnah, okay.
Yeah. Like the ayahs that we read.
Yeah. Like the ayahs that we read.
They prove that there's intellectual evidence.
They prove that there's intellectual evidence. I was confused for a second. All right.
You said, so just avoid even entertaining any unreliable scholars. Sure, Yani, why would you argue with weak reference? You want to argue with weak references or strong references? And not just that, remember, stick to one thing. What you described to me is going all over the place. Don't go all over the place. You stick to one thing that's going to, and you just got to be patient, that's going to burn a Wahhabi out. Because he wants to jump around. He wants to jump all around. And he wants to waste your time. You stick to one point. When he mentions, Yani, you stick to one point, you bring one ayah or one hadith. That's it. He's going to have to do a lot to get you off of that. That should be your position. Whatever is the proof that you want to argue around, everything you say needs to come back to that proof. Don't go anywhere else. He has to do something very significant to make you move to a new proof. This is where I suggested you start. I suggest you start that when you talk to someone, Wahhabi or anyone else, not just Wahhabi, it's for anyone. But Wahhabis, in particular, because they're so slippery, you have to stick to one point. That's it. That's an exercise for you. Did you ever see some boxers when they train? What do? They stick a foot inside of a tire. They get the big tire for like a tractor tire, and one of them puts a foot in this inside the tire, and the other one puts foot inside. So the goal is what? Not to bring your foot out of there. You can't get your foot out of there. That's what you want to do with a proof. That proof, you're not going to get off of that proof. One proof, that's it. Even if he thinks you're ignorant, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he thinks, because all you got to do is be patient and stick to your proof. Argue the right way. You're going to chop him down. You're just going to be chopping him down, chopping him down, chopping him down. Sometimes, yeah, and if you want to make the analogy of a fight, like a boxing match, sometimes a boxer is just looking for the one big hit, the one knockout hit only. You can't get it sometimes. Sometimes you can't just hit him with the one knockout hit. So you just have to keep jabbing and throwing other types of blows, and you wear him down, and you chop him down, and you chop him down until he burns out. He might drop on his own, or he might throw in the towel, or he might say, "Okay, you win. You're right," or the like. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khairan.